Let's see if I'm on time or not. Brooke will let me know. For anybody just tuning in or watching the replay, I'm giving everybody just a few moments to come in. It is a Sunday, so I'm sure somebody's here. I'm sure it'll be a few minutes. There's Brooke. Was I on time? I'm about to open up the video. Lord. So, today, it seems like I can't get very far without that tap on the shoulder. The tap on the shoulder that's like, hey, you misunderstood this. Hey, you see this with new eyes. Hey, 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 hey. And so I'm just taking it for what it is. And if we just gonna crawl our way through the New Testament one chapter at a time, it's okay, right? And today I'm in Luke 2. But if it makes any sense to you, we're in Luke 2 in life, right? And I'm going to tell you a little bit of why, and I'm going to tell you a little bit of how having things hidden from you will all of a sudden find their way back, and you're like, where has that been? Because I've had this whole time. I've crossed it so many times, and yet I never saw it. And it just so happens that it's time for you to see it now, and so you can. And I think that some of that probably has to do with so that we don't throw it away, right? We don't throw the baby out with bathwater. We don't throw things out that we may need later, so we can't find them whenever we need them in the past. So the first important thing that I thought, and I'm going to be toggling back and forth. The only way I'm going to see comments is on the Facebook Live, so we might just be out of luck if anybody has any questions. And obviously tonight is not the night that Pastor Josh is going to be with us. That's Wednesday. I don't even know, okay, but that's Wednesday. And then Dr. Charnel is going to be coming on live, I think she said 1:30 in the afternoon on Thursday during the day, which is cool because I get to watch Melissa Radke in the living room live, which it just so happens that hers are at the same time as mine, so me and my living room sisters, we get to hang out. And you know who you are. And so, anywho, whenever we get to the part, I can see it, Brooke, on my computer. I just look a little bit ridiculous whenever I keep having to look over, and hopefully I won't have to scroll. But I also have my Bible app on the other tab so that because, you know, I mostly read it and highlight on my Bible, on my phone. So, anywho, okay, so in Luke 2, what got me was that the shepherds weren't anywhere like within seeing distance of knowing, hey, there's a lady having a baby over there in that barn. And they wrapped it up and put it in a manger. And so an angel came to them, and they got this whole choir and all of these things letting them know, hey, God had a baby and he's over there in that shed. Because he was acknowledging the roles and the ways of the little people and using them to his favor. In other words, a politician would have squashed it. A priest would have squashed it. It didn't do any of them any favors to share that the king was here and that the Son of God had been born. It would not have behooved them to share that. And so he acknowledged that the little people reach out and they speak to each other and they go forth and they share the good news and they tell these stories about what they've seen and what they've heard. And he knew that he could count on the little people who were on the same level as everyone else, even though they had their own levels of, you know, their own society. He knew that he could count on them to deliver the news because they didn't have any reason not to. And at the same time, it was also quite obvious that Mary was a little people. Mary was a little people, and so was Joseph, and they were poor, and I'm going to go into a little bit more on that in a minute. But what really hit me was that they refer many, many times in Luke that she kept all of these things in her heart and thought about them often. We didn't have to mother first. And we know there were mothers before that. But she too paid the ultimate sacrifice. She went and she had to watch her son go through all of these things. And she had to know that she was raising Jesus. She had the responsibility of raising the Messiah, the one who delivers it all. And even if she didn't have the big picture of everything that would happen, if you took all the old prophecies with a grain of salt, because it is little people, and you kind of do have to kind of filter it out and figure out how much of that has been exaggerated, Mary still had an idea of who exactly she knew because the angel told her, but all of the other prophecies and all of the old things coming to light, and delivering a child filled with the Holy Spirit. How humbling to not be able to offer him more, to not be able to heap and pour all of these amazing things onto him, that she had to do the best with what she had, that she was a little people, and that when we wade through the daily maze of mothering, she also had to do that, but with Jesus. She had to do that with the one who came for all of us. And even, over 2,000 years later, we're still speaking her name, and we're still speaking his name. But we can look at it with a different perspective, and the sacrifice that she also gave, knowing what this child was for. And then whenever we get to Luke 2:24, and he says, so they offered the sacrifice required in the law of the Lord, either a pair of turtle doves or 2 young pigeons. They honored his birth with a sacrifice, knowing that they would have to sacrifice him, that they chose to still honor their obligations. And I did not understand what the law of the Lord's sacrifice was. And it was a redemption. It was the way that newborns were redeemed, and it was only for the firstborn at their time. That this was the description, the best description that I was found, that it was not a poverty offering. That Exodus tells us, the firstborn of your sons you shall give to me. It shall be with its mother 7 days, and on the 8th day you shall give it to me. God tells the Israelites the firstborn of the Israelite children must be offered on the baby's 8th day of life. And in this case of a boy, this coincides with the day of his circumcision. The baby was presented to God at this time, and although the parents had redeemed the baby, God still claimed the firstborn as being special to him and still belonging to him. Note that the 8th day presentation and offering were peculiar to the firstborn, and that was in addition to the sin offering and burnt offering, pigeons, turtle doves, or lambs, that were required for every other newborn baby and for the ritual purification of the mother. And then Leviticus 12:2-3 says, speak to the children of Israel, saying, if a woman has conceived and born a male child, then she shall be unclean 7 days, and on the 8th day he shall be circumcised. So on the 8th day, a baby boy is to be circumcised and redeemed. So the law of the land at the time was that even Jesus, in being equal to us, in walking with us, and going through the same traditions as us, and we're going to talk about tradition again in a minute and how it was important and what a role it played in his life, that Jesus himself was redeemed by the law of the land at that time. And I just thought that was so poignant, that a sacrifice was made for Jesus before Jesus made a sacrifice for us. How honoring what is the tradition of the time, or the tradition of your family, or your belief, or your religion is so relevant to their larger purpose. That smaller sacrifice, that smaller redemption, and the duty of the parents to come together and agree to do that, what they were supposed to do according to their time, led to a much, much bigger, more beautiful, equal for all sacrifice. And I just thought that was the most amazing thing. And the other thing, I'm just going to be super thankful that we are not personally responsible for raising Jesus, okay? Especially in this day and time, which was that in Luke 2:45, they lost Jesus. So he may have been 12, and I'm sure that at that time he was, darn near a man, but they lost Jesus. And what really jumped out to me is I've been in situations where my children have just decided to do things they weren't supposed to do. And so you're like snatching them when they're running by, or Keegan will run down to the vending machine and he takes him a little too long to come back, and you're texting him going, where are you? And so they couldn't even text Jesus, and they lost him for 3 days. For 3 days, they lost Jesus. And yet they did not argue. The Bible doesn't tell us that they were bickering. The Bible doesn't say, well, I thought you had him. No, I thought you had him. No. How could you let him just go over there? Like, this is the Messiah, Mary. How did you let this happen? But that wasn't what happened. What it says is yet another tradition, another family outing. Every year, Jesus' parents went to Jerusalem for the Passover festival. And when Jesus was 12 years old, they attended the festival as usual. After the celebration was over, they started home to Nazareth, but Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem. His parents didn't miss him at first because they assumed he was among the other travelers. But when he didn't show up that evening, they started looking for him among the relatives and friends. When they couldn't find him, they went back to Jerusalem to search for him there. 3 days later, they finally discovered him in the temple, sitting among the religious leaders, listening to them and asking questions. All who heard him were amazed at his understanding and his answers. His parents didn't know what to think. "Son," his mother said to him, "why have you done this to us? Your father and I have been frantic and searching for you everywhere." He said, "But why did you need to search? Didn't you know that I must be in my father's house?" But they didn't understand what he meant. Then he returned to Nazareth with them and was obedient to them, and his mother stored all of these things in her heart. Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and all the people. And so what really got me was that they lost Jesus and they were united. But the little people, poor people, literally lost Jesus just as we lose him figuratively. And they found him at his father's house. And so they looked among the travelers. They looked probably, I'm picturing, they looked everywhere they went. They backtracked to every place that they stopped and every tent that he could be in. But they did not look for him in the most obvious place, which is where he was supposed to be in the first place. And so we wander away and we get distracted in seeking our purpose and wanting to act. Jesus did the same thing. We yearn to grow and do, and Jesus did too. And that gentle correction was never intended as a smackdown. It was to go home. And how easily could that have turned the other way? How easily in our own lives do we take that gentle discipline of, "What were you doing? You worried me," to an attack on who you are and where you are. And Jesus himself, can you imagine the discipline that it took for the Son of God to obey his earthly parents? He could very easily, as a typical 12-year-old, an American 12-year-old, I'm going to say, have said, "I'm doing God's work right here, Mary. Like, you need to sit down." Because he was teaching and he was preaching and everyone was in awe. And Mary's mother's heart appreciated it. But she still had to disappoint her son. And she still had to tell him, "We have to go home." And how many times do we not tell ourselves, "We have to go home"? How did we end up here? I don't know how you got here. And I don't know how we lost Jesus for 3 days. But we need to go and find him so that we can go home. Because home is just like the church. It's where 2 or more are gathered in his name. And at home, we're supposed to be gathered in his name, but we forget about that. And that search looking everywhere for Jesus. And we just heap more and more things on our purpose plate. And we just look for more and more things that might be where Jesus is. Is that where Jesus is? Is that where I'm going to find Jesus? But we don't ever think about the obvious place, to go to his Father's house. And even if his Father's house is not a physical church, it is someone who is going to guide you and point you back to him. It's not ever going to be running in circles and looking and looking under your box and around your box and in your box and all of these things. Your box is to raise your perspective, to help you to find Jesus, to look towards the Father's house. It is never going to be for you to get in and put the lid on it and not grow. And so we need to be looking on where Jesus is. Jesus, who was redeemed and treated as an equal to us at his birth, whose mother stored things in her heart, just like we store things in our mother's heart. And my mama still likes to talk about things I did whenever I was 2 or 3 years old. And she still calls me Ethel, because we store these in our heart, because they mean that to us. They are special to us, just like Jesus, even though he was not where he was supposed to be. And he chose to go home and be obedient, even if it was where he did not want to be. Because we know, as spiritual people, as emotional people, my heart breaks for your heart. You can feel the weight of the spiritual world that some people feel would have been magnified for Christ, and yet he was obedient to them. Because even though he knew things that they could never know, and he had that personal line with God, who was so much a part of him, and he was so filled with the Holy Spirit, he understood that our role in life requires patience, and it requires obedience, and sometimes it requires a little bit of putting off what our fleshly self wants to do, that we want to jump right into that purpose, and we want to be action people, and we want to go, and we want everything to be great and glorifying and all of these things, but we're not done refining. And if we can't be thankful that Jesus did all of this first so that we don't have to, and that he had to overcome the spirit in him that was so large that made him want to go until he was a fully grown adult, because he was still under the protection of his parents, and they still had a duty to God to finish training him up to respect those roles, then how much more respect can we have for our role? How much more respect can we have for our discipline, where we are, to be obedient and to go back? It doesn't say if they nagged him all along the way. I would imagine that Jesus was probably a pretty good kid, considering that he was, without sin. But even more so, the stress on the mama's heart, but he's the good kid. And I still have to tell him that he's going to have to get himself back over to that caravan, because now we're going to be 3 days later getting home. And these people, they had, they did different trades. He was a carpenter, they had orders, they had work to do. And so he had, even without sinning, still caused a delay by going off to do his own thing. Even Jesus was honoring to his station in life right now. How many times have we rebelled against that? And it really, as I'm walking through all of these things, and as I'm realizing all of these things, I go back. I had realized that we had welcomed some things in our life that didn't have a place there. And there's so many things that are hidden from you whenever you want to jump in feet first, and you want to do this and you want to do that. And we take that discipline as an attack on us. Not even a negative discipline, not even a word from man, but the fact that I can't do it right now is going to upset me. And then we're going to start that wishy-wash, and then we're going to stomp away from here, and we're going to go throw a hissy fit over there. And it doesn't look the same because you're 25 years old whenever you do it, or 40 years old, or 50 years old. We are not done stomping our feet about what we want right now. And so these things are hidden from us, and they're buried because they hurt, and you don't ever want to think about having yourself not squashed, but held back, right? Everyone has that stigma of being held back. Well, why are you holding me back? Am I not worth going forward? Am I not worth moving? And it's that we're not done here right now. And so this letter came back to me. It was an email, not even going to say who it was addressed to or any of those things. That was so important to me that I made a copy of it. I had printed it out, and I remembered printing it out, but I could not find it. Literally 5 years. 5 years now. Could not find it at all. And digging through every file in the filing cabinet. So we finally released some things from our life. We finally realized, David and I, that we had come into agreement with spirits that did not belong here. And I'm just going to tell you that fear and poverty, they are best friends. So be very careful which ones sway you in their favor, because they do come together. And when they were released from here and resurrendered, I was on fire. Like, I'm going to go find this other letter where apparently I've been writing for a long time, and I just never realized it. And so I'm going to go find this other letter. Well, in searching for the other letter, I found this one. And it was an evangelist named Bobby Leger who had come to the area. And I emailed someone a testimony of what happened that night. And I could tell you that it was beautiful. And I could tell you that it was amazing. And it was everything that I wanted to hear. And I could feel God's presence so close that I knew the exact moment that he laid hands, the man laid hands on my sister-in-law. It swelled and it became a living thing. And I knew that my family had been touched. And I looked over, and sure enough, he went down the line, and he went down to all of my family. And I was standing back because I was afraid. And he called me over, and this is what he said. When a man prayed over me, he called me over specifically, and he told me things that I held in confidence, only between me and God. He told me that he saw me twirling, that I would dance for God in the physical just like I did in the spiritual. Do you know that every time I close my eyes worshiping, that is what I see? I see myself and God, just us, where I am special, just spinning in his presence and singing straight to him, as free as can be. And then he said that I would spin and be free to love God, that I could be in love with God the way that I wanted to be. That is the exact thing that I pray for when David and I have problems. That if I could just know how to be in love with God, that I could be in love with David. That sometimes I feel so selfish that I don't know that I really love anyone at all. My heart broke that night. These are the things that are hidden from you. This deep yearning to go and do because you have that fire and you have your purpose and you know all of these things. And in this one email, almost 8 years ago was this night. And yet it has never left me, but the words had. And I could not remember what had been spoken over me, but I could remember distinctly how it affected me and how it moved my heart, right? But I was so upset. I was so upset that I could not have it right now. That instead of staying in that place and being obedient and trusting God and trusting that he was going to tell me when to move and when to act, we have that pre-gaming of all these things that are coming. And so we get this discontent that comes with it. But to be obedient and Christ-like would have required us to stay there and be still and trust. And so we look for someone to pin this on. Well, I can't move right now. Why did you not teach me? Why did you not do this? Why did you not do that? Because it is so much easier than saying, I didn't want to trust God. I didn't want to trust God where I was, and I didn't want to wait. I wanted it all right now. And I can tell you that 8 years, even I've been saying 5 for a while, I can tell you right now, that 8 years, I would have had the same end product if I had just done what I was supposed to do and stayed right over here and been obedient. I still could have gotten here because he still would have shown me, because I was still his chosen one to deliver this message. And I was still his one to write this book. And I was still his one to put the words to paper. But because I got discontent and I got disobedient, we had to take a very, and it wasn't just me, it's a partnership. But we had to take a very, very long, convoluted route to get to the same one because we chose the long route. The difference here is seeing that the little people who choose to accept their purpose and the little people who choose to accept their discipline get to cut their route shorter. The little people who choose to share that life through words, who are going to believe what is shown to them, because faith is so much easier when we're not being manipulated and we're not being doubted, then we get to be more Christ-like. And we get to come home and we get to regather and we get to accept our discipline and our obedience to even the other little people around us, because we are worth that time to gather. We are worth that time to sit here, learn what we're supposed to learn here until we are adult Christians enough to move forward with what is given to us. At that time, I would have told you that I was an adult Christian. I would have told you that I knew what I was supposed to do, and I would have been wrong. I would have been wrong, and I would have fought and swam against the current, because in my heart, all of my feelings were telling me, Becky, you have to do something. Becky, you have to do something, because you are so excited to share and you have this revealing to you, but it's not time yet. It's not time yet. And so we're supposed to be glad to sit here and learn some more. But we can do that. We can do that because we know that we only have to be children and we only have to be obedient for so long until we have learned our lesson from our self-teaching and from our redemption and from our fire, the righteous fire, to be unshakable when we do take that step forward. Your purpose is going to be revealed to you here, but you will not fully understand your purpose until you begin to walk it out. That walking it out, that is a faith walk. That walking it out, no one can tell you exactly how to do that except for God. And while we're sitting here and we're being obedient and we're doing everything that we're supposed to be as best as we can to be the most Christ-like, what happened whenever it was Jesus' turn to begin sharing? Then he was given a sign that it was now. And when he started, he did not stop. Because if he had started too early, then he would have had to stop. And look what the price would have been. So if we can be thankful for anything in this time, it's that we were stopped. It's that we were called to go home and gather and be obedient and disciplined for a little bit longer, so that when we do start out, we get to finish. So I really hope that this is speaking to you guys the way that it's speaking to me. I love you people. I am so glad to just be sitting here with you today. I don't even know how to express to you how glad I am that we even started this session. You people are some of my favorite people. I'm just letting you know. And I have to say some of, because there's people in my house. And for some reason, my wifey is not on here. But that's okay. Neither one of them. Actually, I have two. Because that's what we're called to be, right? Like sometimes you need that voice of wisdom of someone who can look outside of your big picture. That's what I mean by wifey. I'm just letting y'all know. Because sometimes I need somebody. I'll call people and I'm like, I need you to Becky me. Because I can't Becky myself. I need someone to tell me what I'm missing. And I'm just thankful that we can even do that here. I'm thankful that we can come together and that we can, like Lisa says, step on each other's toes and not be offended. Because this discipline and this right training here is not just feeding you guys and it's not just feeding me. It's planting seeds of thankfulness that will last forever. These are times that we're going to refer back to, and there's going to be dark times. There's going to be times that we just can't remember anything to be thankful for. This group will always be open. And so half of the things that we talk about, they're not even on this paper. I'm just letting you know. I have to come back here and I listen to it and I'm like, I'm really glad that he wanted me to know that today because I needed that today. And I'm just really thankful that we can all come together and do that. So I hope you guys have a great night. We will be back here tomorrow at 9 o'clock. If there's something in particular, your favorite verse, that would be, I'm about to start that thread, somewhere to feed more on you guys, because I haven't heard, I hope that this is helping you, but no one has specifically said, hey Becky, what would we do with this verse? How would we do this together? How would we walk this out? And that's really what I want to hear from you guys, because this is an idea of fellowship and community and coming together. And if you guys want to hop on here and do a live, or if you want to make a post, like do that, because that's what we're here for, this community and this fellowship and building each other up and just sharing this abundance and this season that is so hard to walk through, but that we are so thankful for, so that we don't have to return to this place. So I love you guys. I will see you tomorrow, and I'm just so glad you're here.